All right. So back at it. So we've got standards attestations. Remember where we left off last time? So I'm going to move this out to external references. So that's going to be done today.
If I remember, we were making a bunch of progress around the sort of the structure, the tree and the leaves, right? Like we got requirements is the tree, and then the leaves are the individual attestations, and we were trying to make them not look exactly like use the same words.
Yeah, we had the references in place that all seemed to work pretty well. So the mapping here we thinned out a lot last time, and bubbled some of the stuff down into the claims section, and kind of established some of the relations down there to make it a little more dry. I don't remember if we had anything like concrete on the docket for this time around, though, to be honest.
Yeah, I thought we had sorted out most of the structure. I thought we left it in a pretty good place last time, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think it might be beneficial to like take a top-down approach, just go through the whole thing one time.
Yeah.
And say, hey, does this stuff make sense? Unless there were some other concrete goals we wanted to explore again.
I think there's one really important aspect that's currently missing, and that is, what are we actually attesting for? So if you look at the SSDF document from our friends at NIST, for example, you can attest to a product, you can attest to a product family, you can attest to the entire organization. And I think there was another option in there as well. That's the obvious piece that's missing right now.
Oh, so that's so interesting, because I in my head I had been thinking that the target of evaluation would be the, like a system or a product or piece of software, but it really could be even a person or an organization or some part of an organization too.
Yep.
It's an excellent point. In the common criteria, we would have called that the target of evaluation, the TOE.
Target what?
Target of evaluation.
Target of evaluation. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that was, of course, the term that we called that. The thing that was being evaluated is the TOE. I don't know if we want to use that, but it does have a little bit of history. Like you could just call it the target or something.
Right.
Yeah, in Toto uses a subject, I believe it is. Basically, it says like this subject, all of these things apply to. And then that subject could be an artifact, I believe. And I think that there was a hash value associated with it for a specific thing. But I think that general idea of all of this stuff pertains to one subject might not be a bad idea, unless we wanted to start supporting something where it could support multiple subjects in one document, which I think could get very messy very quickly.
Right.
Can a BOM refer to organization or anything other than software or devices?
BOM ref can reference any object that has, or a ref can reference any object in Cyclone that has a BOM ref. Organizations do not have one currently, but devices, they certainly do.
No, I just kind of jumped ahead and trying to think, how do we refer to these organizations, like this either a subject or a target of evaluation. So
can you throw the current link to this in the chat, by the way?
Yeah, let me do that.
Why does it feel like all of my working groups are stuck on this same point? They're all trying to figure out what is an organization or who's the provider, or I mean, it's like that's the big problem. It's not the software part. It's just like, who's the organization behind it? How do we describe it? How do we point to it?
Yep.
Honestly, in this case, though, I think it's fairly straightforward. As long as we're thinking to do one subject, one focus point here. Just have to figure out where to put it in the document. But overall, we've got the rest of the taxonomy figured out very cleanly.
Yeah, I think so. I think the next step on the rest of this is to actually just try it. Like, let's put a few standards into it and make sure we don't hit any weird corner cases that we didn't think of.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, no worries. I assume that we were going to get this in for 1.5. I don't know if we actually are though.
If you scroll up then to line 13 in the doc, this is one of the reasons I wanted the link so I could see, like, right here we declare what the component is, I think.
Right.
So
we can have, for example, I mean, I started out thinking that this would be like a, embedded in CycloneDX, which still can be. And then we were talking about, having a dedicated attestation standard, which it could be as well. We could certainly reuse like the manufacturer, the component, or we could do something slightly different, right? We could do, I mean, if we're not going to include this in the CycloneDX proper, we'll just have another CycloneDX attestation standard. We can do something very specific to the to that target, for example, because Cyclone already supports organizations. It already supports obviously components, that sort of thing. We don't support things like product families, nor do we support things like business units. So if that's something we want to support, then maybe Cyclone isn't necessarily, Cyclone proper isn't necessarily, where it belongs. But that SSDF document, I believe, supported product family and something else. Yes, Matt.
Yeah, this conversation, is kind of at the edges of like the formulation stuff, because I have sources and targets and a lot of things I'm trying to, that's why I was like the BOM ref or the external reference, creating it like a choice. Like, so we're pointing to a lot of external things, external documents, external things. To me, it's a continuation of, people, organizations, or other things are external. So it's kind of feels like it's all fitting together.
Okay.
I
So
guess to me,
Jeff,
Steve, it
yeah.
it works so much better if we just say that, for this iteration of this thing, that, if it's an organization building a component that we do an SBOM on that thing, then you could also apply a standard to that thing, rather than try to come up with something super complicated that will cover all the the different kinds of organizations. And I mean, I could imagine, we used to do SSE or we used to do CMM assessments against organizations, and you'd go in and you'd do, you'd run specific tests on different development teams, but then, the results apply to the whole organization. Like, it was really very complicated. And I guess one of the beauties of Cyclone is that it just works on the, something common, something like the base use case.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly leave it for like manufacturer. We can leave it for components. We've got support for attestations now as an external reference in 1.5. So you can have a bill of material that has an attestation for a given component and then point it over here, for example. And I guess if we also had that support for organizations, we could do the same thing for an organization. So that would actually be pretty easy.
I like I said, if we would follow the pattern, it's like external. We could have an organization as external reference, not just a document or data. We were trying to expand the notion of what external reference means.
Right. Yeah, if that's the case, then we could have an attestation for any product, for any whether that product was a cloud service, whether that product was a piece of software, a physical device of some kind, potentially an organization. And you could link out to multiple attestations from a single BOM. So that would be pretty useful, I think. But what if somebody wanted to use this independently of the bill of materials standard? Is that a use case that we also want to support?
I think so, absolutely.
Yeah,
And I think formulation is a candidate for that as well, because I think that it's a workflow model, and a workflow could be like the thing that ties together your audit and all these things.
So if that's the case, then, so we can make a few changes to CycloneDX to be able to, support this the way it is. But I don't think anything in the metadata should be necessarily specific to the attestations. We should probably concentrate on the declaration, and we can reuse existing CycloneDX terms, right? We can have a target that is possibly so if we had, I'm just thinking out loud here, if we had a target that was either an organization, component, service, or external reference, we should be able to hit, I think, most of those use cases.
So taking a look at the I just kind of like did a partial collapse of a bunch of this stuff just to get a high level view of the different pieces that we're working with, because there's so much here, it's hard to kind of keep in the cache.
Yeah.
But what we're doing here is we basically have an array of standards, right? An array of attestation objects, right? And then an array of claims and an array of evidence. The thing that we're basically talking about now is we're trying to attest for a particular thing, a particular subject, based on all of the other data that we're pulling together in here. So I would think that within that attestations object where we have assessors, the attestations array, where we have objects that contain assessors, we may want to just put in there, a subject, and that way you can have a subject of an attestation. And that would be a required field, because one way or another you need a subject, but then everything else could theoretically be optional even. But I think that's kind of maybe in our current framework, the right place to put it, if that makes sense.
I think a subject should be left a little vague, if you will, and not hard coded as a new object. I think I definitely want to be able to point to subjects that are components, subjects that are external references, things that can be bomb wrapped.
Yeah, and that's fine. We can just have a thing here that says subject, right? And it can be a generic thing, but having someplace to put it, I'd say, is the thing that we need to have somewhere in here. However it shapes itself in terms of what data it is, I do think we need it somewhere in here.
There's some eloquence to what Jeff said. I like him using the target. Was it target of investigation? Target of what it was? Was it Jeff? Target of
target of evaluation.
Evaluation, because like that semantic fits with targets that we have in the workflows that build CI pipelines. So it's just interesting.
Well, since
one thing
we're
that's
talking
driving
about
me crazy. So one little thing that's driving me crazy is that says accessor instead of assessor, which should be ASS, and it's just
okay.
And it says it three times in there, so my OCD is just going off the end of it.
I'm glad you found that, Jeff. That's hilarious. It's funny, you stare at something for so long, you just don't see it.
Otherwise, this thing starts to look like, some sort of access control assertion. Like, I was like, what? Accessors? Oh, maybe we do need, who can access it? Like, who can access the attestation? And I was like, what? Wait, no.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Right. That's a different working group.
Yeah. I like the target of evaluation, actually. That's
So the one thing
Why
I'd
is-
say is that if it's in here, we're not really, it's not a target of an evaluation, it's a target of an attestation, or just generically the target of this
Target.
object. So I'm not sure if of evaluation would be the right one, or if maybe of something else, or just target by itself.
we can simplify it. I'm good for
Well,
simple.
I don't mind
I
having
just
it
throw
just
that out there
targeted.
as a talking point. I didn't mean to unilaterally say that. So just kind of like a thought.
Why
I
is it under the attestation instead of somewhere external to this? That's what I'm struggling with, is because we've got,
Yeah, my thought with that was that if it's in the attestations array, right, where we could support multiple targets in one document fairly easily then, because the attestation is then a collection of different, the attestations array is a collection of individual attestations, right? One attestation would be a collection of, because it's a map, it would be a collection of requirements, claims, counterclaims, right? The overall conformance and score for a particular target. And it could also be the assessor, the one who did the assessment, could also be included in there, and it's all for a particular target. That way we could support multiple attestations for different targets in one document fairly cleanly, but we could also just easily target one in that same manner.
no, I think you sold me.
Yeah.
So should we, in that case, should we have a section called targets and have refs in the target section here? I mean,
Yeah, I
just like
think
we
that's what we're leaning towards.
Yeah, that
Right.
is kind of the pattern we've been following.
yeah.
Okay. So basically, so this would be basically a ref to the target,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Got it. Okay. So this would be,
Target one.
exactly. So this would be, and now would a single attestation apply to multiple targets?
Yes.
That's a choice of the assessor, right? An assessor can choose to.
Okay.
So
So
it
we
should be an
basically
array
have it,
of targets,
right?
target
Okay.
refs.
Got it. So, and then we come down here. And this is going to be an array of, this is going to be an array of components, oh wait, organizations, right?
Yeah.
Well, it could be,
Components,
yeah.
services, BOM refs.
And all those references could be of the type resource reference choice.
Right. Okay. So
And
this would
then-
be an array of different types of objects then. That makes a lot of sense. And then each one of these objects would then have a corresponding target ref.
Yep.
And now that I think about it, that makes a lot of sense, right? You might want an attestation that covers an organization, several components that they build, and I don't know, maybe several services that they use. And that's the scope of evaluation.
Yeah, and on that one,
Scope is an interesting word there, by the way, because like scope is what pen testers use to say, hey, here's what's in scope for my pen test. And it's, it's a bunch of different things, but that's a term that people use a lot to describe what we're talking about.
can I pull out one other thing maybe out of that declarations and attestations section? Since we are supporting claims, counterclaims, targets, all with refs, should we do that with assessors as well? Bubble that up as a separate array in the beginning, and then we can just link them in this mapping section.
Yeah, we can do that.
I'm asking a question because that seems to be the pattern that we're leaning into here, and I do like the pattern, so I think it makes sense, but throwing it out there.
Would you have more than one assessor?
If we're talking now about this document being able to support multiple targets, then yes, I think we could have multiple multiple assessors in here, like one's internal group to assess for one thing, an external group to assess for another, especially since we're supporting multiple targets with multiple frameworks or standards. I think that we probably would want that.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Now we might have it here. So instead of having assessors plural in this attestation section, maybe it is a singular assessor in here, but I would still make it an assessor ref out to the other array that has that information.
Right. Okay.
So maybe we don't support multiples in here, right? Because this should be like one target, one standard, one assessor.
So what would be a scenario where we have multiple assessors creating a single attestation document? I mean, for me, as an auditor creates an attestation. So for me, auditor is a single entity for that particular document, right?
Yeah, but that's where here we would have the
Oh.
assessor ref, right? So we'd refer to the assessor. So there still would only be one who's making the attestation. But since we support multiple attestations in here, right? One assessor might specialize in, federal government things. Another one might specialize in security, right? Somebody who does a BSIM audit might not be the same person who does your SAM assessment or something like that, right? It might be
So
different
in some
vendors
ways,
who are doing each of those.
Eventually is like a collated attestation document where the organization is collating all the audits into a single document.
It could be.
Okay.
And that was kind of like the question that we were leading with initially here is, if that's a goal, then we could put that targets in here in the attestation section. We could, start pulling this out and make this really kind of flexible in that regard. I do think it's pretty powerful if we do that, because we could do a single assessment here with no problem. Our single attestation, or we could bubble up and make this a comprehensive document that describes the landscape for like the entire company, all of its individual components and everything. Kind of encompasses both at that point.
Should they be single document though? I mean, for me, it's a collection of documents. If we give the flexibility of collecting it and all in a single document, it'll be super verbose. I mean, a single document will be too large. But anyway, so I mean, it's a flexibility, but I'm for me, providing that flexibility creates a problem of single document doing a bunch of like more than it can be like more than, I guess it just creates its own problem of size. Like how much can it hold?
Yeah, and that's where I think we've talked a couple times back and forth on like, how do we want to scope this? Do we want to break out individual pieces or not? But with this one in particular, it's nice to be able to collate everything together into one format, but also use that same format for individual pieces of it. So if we wanted to have a system that just built claims, right, and put that into a database, we could do that with this format, right? Because this does support just the claims. And then if we wanted to pull everything together, we could do that. If we wanted to just pull together the stuff for one standard, we could do that, or one component, we could do that. We could get all of the claims and evidence against a component, even if we're not trying to do attestations against a standard, right? So like, to me, this does seem like it's very valuable that it is that flexible and open. However, to your point, we are getting a little complicated if we're allowing for that kind of thing. So I'm not sure, but I do see value in this as well.
Cool. I mean, I don't feel strongly against it, except for, I mean, it could cause a size issue. That's pretty much it. No. But yeah, I mean,
the one thing that I've quickly realized after initially creating a lot of this stuff is that it is impossible to truly understand how people will look at a standard and use it.
Yeah.
People use it in ways that you've never envisioned.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's for sure. So I think flexibility wise, I think this is probably a good choice, although I personally would not use it this way. I'm sure others probably will. Okay. I think that was a good call. So we've componentized targets. We've componentized assessors.
So question. Oh, go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry, I cut you
No.
off. I have a bad habit of doing
I'm
that.
just I'm trying to see what else is obvious that needs to be done. I'm not seeing anything obvious.
So couple thoughts on polishing. If we could scroll up a little bit here. When we say we have assessors and we now have this format for the assessor, does this make sense for us to have this type of format when we're calling out targets in a completely different way, right? Because originally we were talking about, do we want to have the target be an organization, a part of an organization, or a component, or a family? Do we have that same concern here with the assessor? Is it an organization? Is it an internal thing, right? We've put in a type, we've put in some of these things. So do we want to treat this the same way as the targets, or do we want to continue to use this here?
So
we want to
I've
pull
got
something like this down into targets. Like
in most places in Cyclone, you can either use a organization, an individual, or both, one or the other. So you know, the assessor could be an independent consultant, it could be an organization. I don't know of any other use cases that would fall outside of that, though.
I don't
I
think that
mean,
an internal organization could do that, right? Or would we? Because that would be more like a claim here in this context, I think.
yeah, I mean, the assessor, for example, if I'm an internal, if I'm an audit function in my company, for example, I could say something like, you know, ServiceNow audit or something. There's no reason why I couldn't do that. So I don't necessarily know that we have to get granular on slicing the organization.
Yeah, but having that information still handy too. I'm just trying to understand. I'm playing around with two kind of opposing ideas here, right? One is we've gotten pretty specific here with what we call an assessor, right? And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but we've gone really generic with what we call a target. I would think we would either want to get a little more generic with the assessor, or in the target, we would at least want a wrapper clause of some kind for the targets to give you a little bit of metadata around there. So at the very least, I would be like, you know, bomb ref and type maybe, or bomb ref and description, or something like that down in the target section to give it a little bit more focus of what we're talking about within there.
in the target section?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the assessor section.
It's kind of like seeing the different levels of granularity for the two is what's making me think this way. So down here, when we're talking targets, right, we're saying, well, we could have a generic organization or a component. Would it make sense maybe to have a little bit of a metadata wrapper in here, create an object, right? So the target is an object. It's got a bomb ref. It's got a type, and the type is either organization, component, service, bomb ref, external. That way, at least we're starting to get a little bit of shape here. Would that be useful? Would that not be? It seems a little weird here that we could have a targets and just allow a lot of different objects to be in here. Doesn't seem
Well, if you support a bomb ref or you support a external reference, both of those have their own type systems. Both have types. Anything that typically is a bomb ref has a type or of importance. So
yeah, and then that makes it really difficult to use this document and process this document.
the gold representation versus processing, you know. So I mean, adding more types on a reference is problematic, because what if it conflicts with a target? You say I said something here and it's something else elsewhere, you know. So where's the claim of who owns the type of the system? You know, who owns that?
Yeah, but this is where I think we in terms of like,
it's like, I mean, by default, like, it's like external reference is a reference, it is typed. The only thing it really needed a reference if you wanted not to have the whole object, I mean, the external reference, you would go to it and the external reference definition has a type already, it has an enumbered field. So, but a bomb ref is a bomb ref. Unless you want to create a new type of reference.
No, I mean, we can simply add a bomb ref to an organization or an individual. That would be an easy.
Exactly. But you know, I think that's the simplest way to do it, actually. But I think what's being argued is that you need to type locally before you follow the pointer to the ref.
So
Yeah,
are you
that might be
saying,
because
Derek, are you saying that maybe we have something like within targets, we have something like organizations and then list
no,
out the
no.
organizations?
What I'm saying is that we'd have an object. So if you start just making an object in there, right, and then we would have type, and then type would be, you know, whatever those others are, and then we would have ref. You know, we'd have a bomb ref type. Sorry, we would have a bomb ref in here on another line, and then that way it becomes very clear what we're talking about within the scope of this document.
Before you follow the pointer. So I mean, what I suggest doing is if we want to use the reference choice type, we could actually add an optional field to the reference choice. We can add properties to it. So you could actually add, if you want to create properties to describe, you know, locally, that's a generic way of doing it.
Right.
Again, I hate adding types to pointers. So it's a point.
Yeah, but this is where I'm trying to also understand like the actual use case here, because if I'm trying to build an automation system and my main concern is that the executable that you are giving me, which would be the target, right, was built using this standards and this framework that I care about that I've set as a requirement, right? How am I going to automatically process that if I need to support all of these different potential target types?
Well, I mean, you load the entire graph into your system, so you already have hashes and things of the types you're pointing to, right? You have them loaded, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I guess my
Yes.
concern is probably just because I'm not that familiar with all of these other ones and how they interplay. So I definitely would lean on you guys for the expertise.
When I load NestBomb now, I load anything that has a bomb ref gets hashed in different multi-hash tables, so that I can easily look them up on a bomb ref, right? They get hashed.
Okay. All right, I think that makes sense then. Yeah, and then if you guys are saying that works just as is with the, you know, targets being that array without some kind of a wrapper, then sure.
I mean, we could definitely put a wrapper if we want.
I think that I think the happy middle ground is, you know, add if we had took the resource reference choice in a future whatever, added properties thing to it, then have at it. If you want to add hints or, you know, things for your application that help declare what that pointer points to or whatever, just make it a properties field. Don't force it on people necessarily.
Right. I'm just thinking about, like, in JSON schema, this is really easy to pull off, but I'm thinking about XSD, and there's a lot of different combinations here. And
yeah, but if we did what we did up there in evidence, or we had a type and we had the different things that were allowed, we're still maintaining some control over the items that are allowed in there explicitly.
I'm just saying Steve he figured out the XSD for choice for choice recently. I don't know what the struggle is firsthand. So anyway.
yeah, unfortunately, you have to like come up with every iteration. So, and the more things that you allow, the more verbose your XSD becomes.
Gotcha.
I mean,
I still think the pointer's enough. I mean, it works everywhere else. I mean, bomb ref I mean, we're referencing other bombs. Everything here is compositional anyways. So, I mean, if we either rely on a pointer and a bomb ref, or we don't, I mean, then we go back to CycloneDX 1.2, you know?
Right. So all of these are basically going to be bomb refs. So all these are bomb refs. All these are bomb refs. And then we could, I mean, we could do something like, how did I do that before with the organizations and whatnot?
I mean, we have,
This-
I haven't pulled up the schema, but we have organizational entity, and if that is a bomb ref, we're good. Right?
Right.
We have entities, we have, and they should already have bomb refs, and they already have properties. So,
Right.
and
I'm just thinking for simplicity of maintaining this stuff,
well, you
because
figured
we've
out,
got,
like I say, if you figured out resource reference choice, I think it still works everywhere, right? It's an array of
Do what?
resource. If you have resource reference choice, and that's what you solved the XST for last week, that's your array type.
yeah, I'm just thinking about something like this. It's kind of like what you have in formulation. You've got the dedicated components and services within formulation itself, which are specific
Oh,
to
yeah,
the
yeah.
formulation thing.
Yeah. So
That's-
they're,
that's-
yeah.
so it makes a detachable document. Yeah. So basically you look at your top level, your structure JSON object, and you make sure it's detachable.
You don't have
Right.
to guess the type. I guess that's actually where my agita was coming from. I'm like, well, how am I supposed to just randomly guess the type of what this new object is in this targets thing? Because there's no clear definition of that necessarily. It could be any of these. So maybe
Right.
that's where my concern was really coming in. And this looks a lot better from that perspective, at least.
Well, yeah, I don't know if we put them under targets or we put them, under something more generic though. But yeah,
Well, external references are not going to be
no, because they're
Representative
built
bomb
they're built in the type. So anything that you would want to reference to be a bomb ref, if you want to declare locally, that's what you put here.
And the only thing that doesn't have a bomb ref right now is organizations, but I can add that.
Right. So-
That's not a big deal.
And there's also like content. There's like another one. Let me look it up. There's another one for like contact or something. Let me look it up.
There is. It's organizational contact. We can call it organizational contact. We can call it
And that works
individual.
beautifully because you can have an organization doing an audit. You have contacts from the organization who perform the auditors or contacts. So I think that works nicely if they both
Yeah.
had bomb refs, right?
Now, question, would this actually be, this would be the actual like component, or this would be the actual organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
okay.
Like I said, I'll just say I'll leave it under targets, but I think that like for formulation, if we want to follow the pattern, they're defined under like formula. So if you have a
Right.
top level object, they should all be in the top level object to follow the pattern.
Right, which it is. So it's under declarations, which is the top level object for what it is that we're working with. Within declarations, we've got standards, assessors, attestations, claims, evidence, and targets. So that makes sense.
Okay.
Now, the one difference though is that now we are declaring these as like subarrays here. I don't think that this necessarily matters, but the pattern that we are using elsewhere is we've got like the ref with the type, right? Or the ref with the data there that we care about. So this is a little bit different from that perspective. I don't know if that matters or not, but I'm just calling out like pattern wise, this is different.
Can you elaborate?
Which one is that?
So if you look at the claims here, right, we've got a bomb ref, right, as the thing. Then we've got the subject. And then we've got, oh, wait a minute, we've got the subject there.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So the claims were against particular subjects, which does make sense. Then again, we've got this idea of subject that's buried in the claim that we might want to reuse.
Right. You can't have them both.
Anything that's reused should be declared at the top level if it's going to be as a reference. So
Yeah, this could be a ref.
Yeah.
I'm saying that like if it's not, if you don't want to call it a target or TOE or what Jeff called it, that's what I'm saying is, you just call it resources or something like that, or, anyway.
Well,
if it's
well,
not-
no.
it can't be semantically considered a target, that is.
Right, but what we're talking about here is like this claim is being made against a particular thing, whether it's the build process or the individual component or the organization as a whole. And it's the exact same concern that we were just talking about around targets.
Well,
So
I guess I was interpreting what Jeff's saying is that that the term subject goes away, being something that's acted upon and it's more of a target, more proactive It's the
I don't think Jeff realized this was in here because he brought that concern up saying like, we need to deal with targets and we hadn't really considered it. And then we haven't touched that section of claims in 3 weeks. So it wasn't in any of our headspaces that it existed there.
Right, exactly. So it already existed there, and we just put it up here is our conflict. So it existed here, the concept existed here, it was called subject, but we just put it up in the attestation itself.
Maybe it's not that it's mutually exclusive though, because if we had a array of targets, right, simple refs that we could refer to, a claim would be made against something. A claim would be made against some kind of a target, right? And then maybe that subject becomes target as well, and it refers to one of those external ones.
That's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah, but we leave it up in 70 as well, is my point, because the claim will be made against.
That's fine.
things.
That's fine.
Yeah,
That's perfectly fine in my mind.
So what is this going to be though? Is this like an enum of product component organization?
no,
or?
that would be a target in the exact same way that 70 is done, except instead of the target of the assessment or the attestation, it's the target of the claim, but we're reusing the object, the same concept for either of those.
Yep, I like it. I like it a lot.
Do we want to use the same noun?
We could change it out so 70 could be attestation target, because this is an array of attestation objects.
It's qualified by the object.
Yeah.
Same thing we did.
And then claim target down below, attestation target and claim target.
Yeah, we just gotta get the descriptions right in the comments right.
Now, is this going to be plural as well?
No, because a claim should be a very atomic thing. So I would say line 91 should be claim target, and line 70 should be attestation target.
But doesn't the object qualify that? I mean, do you need a different?
I don't know.
Yeah, I would say just is qualified array save. They're both singular targets in both 70 and 91. They're qualified. Yeah.
So this is plural. The attestation is going to be plural because we can do multiple claims, and the claim itself would be singular.
Well, I thought Derek was saying that it's a singular in 70 as well.
Well, why did we make it plural there? It was intentional that we did it. And it was because we were only going to have one assessor, but the assessor could be attesting to something for multiple things. So it could be, a particular set of product families meet this requirement, or a particular set of products for this one group meet this overall attestation, or meet this overall thing that we're trying to convey.
So is there, this is a question. I've been wondering this myself, for not any specific use case, but the grouping aspect for components. We have, bombs have nesting of components. And you have like the Uber jar, example of why we do it. It's like, is that the way we represent groups, is the nesting of components? We can create a composite component that's, the Uber jar, the Uber component, or the Uber brand name, or the Uber product name, whatever. And I don't know, is there a way to get around, say, let's group these things and have a single target? You know what I mean?
So let me throw out something else here. Let's go back to that example where I claim that 80% of my development staff is trained for security on a yearly basis. But let's say I'm actually claiming it for multiple products that I manage. Right, I've got a dozen products, and I want to claim that I do 100% of my developers get trained every single year for multiple products. The singular approach doesn't let me do that. I would have to repeat.
Well, that's why you've got multiple targets up in the other one, right?
So the claim is for the team, right? So the
team is a group. Yeah.
So
sorry.
And you include that claim in the any attestation which is related to the group of products. So like Derek was saying, the multiple targets in the attestation will account for that claim being in that attestation. Does that
Right.
make sense?
But,
But what
I would have to repeat this a dozen times and supply the probably the same evidence.
Right. So what I'm saying is the target in the claim would be for the team, and the target in the attestation will be for the products.
But what Steve's saying though is that if we did that up in the products, we would need a claim for each of the teams that's responsible for each of those products, right? On the one hand, I do think that granularity is good because you could then be supplying the evidence and the bits for every single piece of the team. On the other hand, you could do that just by having the claim support multiple targets.
But in that case, it depends on the persona which is generating it, right? So in case of the team is going to generate a claim and give it to you, and the attestation is going to be generated by the assessor. So assessor can collate different targets. The claimant can claim for their scope. So in that case, if you're, I mean, keeping one target makes it simple. At least that's how I see it. And in case of assessor, the use case is very clear. They're going for a group of products or group of teams, or
That goes back to my group question. You know, I think there's ways that you can create grouping mechanisms so you don't have to have pluralities of things.
I think that was the goal, honestly, with some of this attestation object that's there, the attestations array there that we've got, was to provide some of that grouping and literally map this requirement from a standard is, met by these claims with, these mitigation strategies or with these counterclaims. Like that's the way that we were, I think, representing a lot of that for a target set.
or we can also explore the grouping strategy, which Matt is.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, you threw a curveball at me, Steve, because you talked about like person attestation. Oh my, I'm gonna mess that up every single time. They're attesting to that they had some certification done for all their team members. That's a human thing. But in terms of BOM, we're typically talking about services and components, right?
Right, but here it's not about that only. This can be about an entire organization, right? In like, hey, SOC 2, for example.
Yeah, so that's the curveball. So I'm just coming forward. I audited half a call. This is my second call, so I'm trying to.
Okay.
Okay.
So rewinding from like a high level, the claims there were intended to be an individual within an organization is making a claim that they are doing something. It is a concrete thing. And the example we've been using that Steve brought up earlier was we have 80% of our developers trained, right? And then we are claiming that. We are saying, yes, we have that. Here's the evidence. If an auditor or somebody else finds counter evidence, or if we're aware of it, we can put it in at that level, right? And then when we are looking at the overall assessment, right, that's where we actually do like, hey, the requirement is that 100% of your developers are trained. Well, here are the claims that relate to it, right? Here's a counterclaim that an auditor might be making, right? And then the conformance score is really like, well, okay, it's 80%, it's not 100%.
But to me, it's still the same target that you're testing for a group. You're testing for my department or my organization, right? That's still the target. I can have an individual claim for each member of my group. Maybe that's what Manoj was saying earlier as well. I mean, for me, in my mind, I'm worrying more about software attestations and build process, and I'm going to create a separate attestation for every variant of a component that I build, every variant, because it's literally a different instance of a build. So it's not that we don't, it's a different instance perhaps. So yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think that we're targeting the software build pipeline question here. I thought we were.
No, I'm just saying that where I'm coming from. I'm just explaining where I'm coming from.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I just try to, at the onset of this, my last response was that, to me, the target is still an organization. You're saying I am, I have a bunch of claims that back up my attestation of my organization in respect to some standard or some certification that I'm doing, right? It's still a
Yeah.
single target.
The
It's
goal,
organization.
yeah, the goal of this was to be a general purpose machine readable attestation format. So therefore, I should be able to use it for the cases that you want, Mark, but I also should be able to use it for things like SOC 2, where people actually have to, do the checkbox routine.
But again, I think that this does support both as is, because, an individual might make a claim against a single target. But if we want to say that like all of the software artifacts that we're releasing, up in 70 were all built underneath a SOC 2 umbrella, right? We could do that by listing the software artifacts and the targets and then having all of the evidence in this attestation object for it. So it is general purpose in that sense. Now, whether that's actually useful from someone using it in that scenario, I think there's a lot of arguments both ways on that one, but like that this format does meet that requirement, right? And does grant that ability.
Yeah.
I'll just say schema's cheap and pluralities or arrays are easy to add in. I just like to see the use case, the compelling use case for plurality written down so I can analyze it on my own time and convince myself I can't create a group.
Well, yeah. I think here we're trying to maintain some level of dryness so that you can say that, this grouping of claims, counterclaims, evidence, mitigation, can apply to one or more things so that we don't have to redeclare it every single time. So I think that that's the main intent with keeping plural in line 70.
It's cheap to me. I just want to, like I said, at the end of the day, I just like to have a example here that, I can buy into.
Maybe that's the next step. I think we've got a pretty good model. I think we might have a few questions still kind of lingering. But I think for next steps, because we're almost out of time for today, I think the next step is to actually test this out.
Yeah, I'll just say one parting comment, one closing thought is like when IBM produces our products, like we have 2,500 software products that we create today. And we have a product deal and deliverable ID. So it's a combination. So we would never produce a single document that covered every variant is considered a different unique deliverable ID, a different packaging, and each would have to have a separate attestation document. I'll say that.
Yep. But when you're first signing that contract as IBM with another organization and they ask for evidence of SOC 2,
we'll have it linked in our database, our database with product deliverable. We'll be able to look at the bombs and the link. If we have linked these external documents, reference the bombs, we'll have a combination of bombs we'll have a bomb per every combination of product and deliverable ID, and each of those will have maybe they could if there's they could reference the same singular document. But
right. And what I'm trying to say is for my organization, which is a small one, right? I'm working on getting my SOC 2. I'm going to manually write this one document here that shows that my organization has gone through SOC 2, right? And that theoretically everything that I'm building should be treated under that umbrella, right? So like it's a different use case than the one that you're talking about around particular products within there. Now, I do think we need to be able to support both, but I don't see why we can't support both with what we've got right here, is my point. Because your case, you would just build one attestation document for your one product or for your combination of products. Each one would get its own document, right? My organization, smaller, doesn't have that many products, would likely just build the one, right? And might have a couple of additional ones here or there that it would build. And then I'd make the call, do I want to just roll it into one document or do I want to make separate ones for it?
Yeah. So next week, let's. I've got a few use cases that that I have in mind, both on the large scale, like similar to Matt, although not quite as big, and more on the manual side for some other stuff as well. So Maybe next week we take a standard and we start testing it out. If
The
anybody
other thing
wants
I'd
to
say is that we've
propose,
got, oh, sorry, go ahead.
if anyone wants to propose like a starting place for something like a, whether it's PCI or, you know, BSIM or SSDF or whatever.
I mean, I would say if you, since you said SSDF, I would say that because that there's already mapping to that to Salsa. So,
Okay.
because Red Hat was working on an SSDF mapping for Salsa.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd throw out is that while we're doing that, we should keep in mind those 6 use cases that we called out in meeting 2, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
We should definitely keep those particular use cases in mind because that's what we had built this to support originally.
Right.
I do think there's going to be a lot of tuning, but trying to do both of those, implement SSDF for a particular artifact or for an organization here, right? With a mind to those different use cases.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we are at time. I think we've made a lot of progress, and I'm really looking forward to the next steps and actually testing to see if we built will actually, you know, do what we think it's going to do. Or
It never does. It never does.
We'll see. Flip of the coin. All right.
I'll just
What's
say it
that,
was, I was going to say, that, you know, it was hard to do for formulation, but I'm glad I did it. So,
Formulation was by far the most difficult thing that the CycloneDX community has ever done, and you've done the overwhelming majority of it, Matt. So thank you. It was an enormous engineering effort just to kind of figure out everything that needed to.
thank God you did XSD. That I would have quit.
You're welcome.
But next is the guide. We got the guide coming up.
All right, all. Cheers. Have a great day.
Right.
Bye. Bye-bye.